Hey guys, Coach here. Hey, this week's follow-up and next week's follow-up is all about the design phase, the actual sitting down at the table and creating something one-dimensional on paper and doing it in a very simplistic, easy fashion, so not only do you understand it as it evolves on paper, but anybody you give it to will understand it. We're not going to be doing anything fancy here. I've got a large piece of paper, 24 by 36, and I have some simple little drawing tools that you could pick up from Amazon or office supply stores mostly. You know, you're talking about the old engineer ruler, talking about an edging template, you know, or a curving template, something that you could put curves and stuff into your landscape. A simple little barrel landscape template, you know, is probably $6 or $7 at the store. And for ease of drawing for me, so that you guys can see what I'm doing, I'm actually going to take a huge risk and put Sharpie pen down for some of the bigger borders, say like the property line, the dwelling outline, and walkways, that kind of stuff. That way you guys can see it, because sometimes on white paper and videotaping it or filming it, sometimes pencil and stuff get kind of washed out. You don't get to see quite what you want. So I was going over the past 2 weeks of filming and looking at that yard and really getting some good ideas for what my client is going to need, not necessarily what they want. They do have a budget and it's not very big, but they have great ideas that aren't exactly meshing with the budget. And as I have taught you many, many times before, it is really easy to design a $100,000 landscape. But if you only have 10 to throw at it, unless you're doing this over multi-phase, multi-year type of project, it's kind of disheartening to get this really fancy thing all done and you go, okay, let me start pricing this stuff out, rather than starting with a firm budget and going, okay, I got 10 grand to work with. Let's design this thing so that we're in and about that budget really close. It relieves a lot of frustration. Okay, so let's get started. I'm doing the front yard first, and if you don't remember the front yard and what it looks like, I'm going to put it right here so you can refer back. Hey, I'm Matt. You can call me Coach. Every Friday I bring with me landscape DIY education, concepts and theories, ideas and solutions, so you guys can go out and tackle a landscape project yourself, get professional results, save a whole lot of money in the process, and in this day and age, be a lot more self-reliant. Man, after a 20+ year career in the green industry, I'm bringing with me a lot of knowledge and experience that I want to share with you guys, the new, modern, educated, self-reliant homeowner of today. So if any of you are wondering out there exactly how you take a backyard, a front yard, or a whole piece of property and reduce it down to, you know, a piece of paper so that it can be legible and understood, it's all under the guise of scale. And this engineer rule brings it home really easy. And what we're going to be using in this drawing at least for the front yard, the backyard's a little bigger, but I think we'll still be able to do it, is we're going to be using a 1/4 inch scale. Now this engineer ruler here is about, well, it's about 25 years old now, and I have another one there that's almost 35 years old. So they've been around a while, but it doesn't really matter because it's always the same. We're going to be using 1/4 inch scale, and if you look over here, you'll see 1/4 inch on that side, and you'll see 1/8 inch on that side, and then a lot of numbers in between. Well, for you guys looking at it, going from right to left, you'll see a 0, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, so if you go up to 12 right there, in a 1/4 inch scale, that's 12 feet right there. Okay, if you go over here to the 1/8 inch scale, you'll see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in 1/8 inch scale, which is a lot smaller, that is 8 feet between the 0 and the 8. So when you look at the engineer rule, over here you have 1 inch scale, over here you have 1/2 inch scale, and those 1/2 inch represents a foot. So you're taking what would be 12 inches and reducing it down to a 1/4 inch. And that's how you take a whole yard and reduce it down to a piece of paper. And that's what I'm going to be showing today. What we're going to be starting out with on the design for the front yard is we're going to be using 1/4 inch scale and running it all the way out. And it goes out to about 48 feet, but I'm going to go 46 and then add to it after that. So it'll be 46 feet, and then I will slide it a little bit more, and it'll be whatever distance we have. It's a long, narrow, rectangular lot. So when we do that, we're going to have to use 46 plus probably another 26, because the longest length is 75 along the west fence line. So let's get started, shall we? Okay, plot plan is basically in place. And when I say plot plan now, the only thing that I have designed in that is going to be new is the larger sitting porch that we are going to consider at the entry to the home. So let's review really quick. And Maestro will put in things here that will reflect back on what we're looking at compared to what it's going to be. So as we're coming in the front gate up here, we're doing that runway 2-9er walkway. Then we're going to go up onto a much larger covered sitting porch up here. Here's the front door. Here's our house. And then over here is the side gate. Over here is the main part of the yard with the gate that's going into the backyard. And then the fence line and the street that's out here, the intersection, and our west street over here. So there's your plot plan. I hope you can see it with the black lines. I really do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some creative license. I know that this is accurate to under a foot, and now I'm going to start putting in some ideas that I think will really work for them, not only now, but in the future. Remember, this is the front yard, and what I always say about a front yard is your aesthetic, creativity, and curb appeal needs to be punched in here. Someday you may sell it. Someday you may have guests, and this is the welcoming end of your landscape, your property, and that's where it has to be its best. It can't be half-assed, and it really has to look and feel like you, the person that lives there, the person that has taken all the time and energy to put this thing together. So you get from your family and friends and even the mailman a wow factor. And a wow factor is a big part of landscape design for residential use. So well, join me back in a few minutes and I'll have a few more elements and we'll go over that as well. Okay? Thanks. So a couple more elements that are put in, both existing and new. So we're going to have the connecting walkway that goes from the backyard gate to the front yard walkway. Why do we do something like that? You got to give yourself a durable surface to get from point A to point B without having to walk through wet grass, mud, or anything else. You walk through a finished, durable surface that you could do it barefoot if you wanted to. The other elements that are in here are existing trees. These are existing gray juniper trees and also eastern white pine trees over here. And they're going to stay. They're not coming out. Clients want to keep them for whatever reason. So now we've got those elements in. I am going to start drawing in bed lines and some of the infrastructure as far as irrigation, lighting, and then we'll get into some plant creativity. Okay, let's move forward. Well guys, here we are. Welcome back. This is a DIY form of landscape design in its completed form. I did a little bit of due diligence as far as researching a lot of the USDA zone where the client is and the amount of maintenance that they wanted versus what it would look like, and I came up with this. You can see how something of the rectilinear yard that we saw in the basic plot plan has been kind of eliminated a little bit with a few more sweeping bed lines for the lawn that's going to be, the curving walkways that allow you to transition all across the front yard, the large sitting deck that's going to be out in front, and I hope they put a nice big covered portico over the top of that. That would really look slick. But then again, we got budget to consider. They did not want to remove the junipers, the juniper trees that were part of this existing landscape, nor did they want to do anything with the pines that were over here. And because of that, some of the tree selection and plant selection kind of worked in and around that instead. So as far as hardscape goes, we put our valve assembly. Remember, our hose bib is down here. So that's going to have to be dug down and a T put in it. And then they can run a line up here to their valve assembly and then hopefully another hose bib over on this side of the house. But valve assembly there, and then irrigation color coded for the new lawn bed area, and then the little eyelid bed over on this side here. And we took this lawn and brought it way out because lawn and pine trees, they do not mix very well unless you really thin this thing out a lot, both of them, and limit up quite a bit. Then you'd probably stand a chance. But instead we used kind of some shady loving, acid loving type of plants in the form of bird nest spruce and some flaming silver pieris back in here. So I think that's going to look good. And then to tie in one side of the yard to the others, we have some flaming pieris underneath the juniper over here. And then we have some Phelan Blue Deodar Cedar, one of those dwarf wandering deodar cedars that you've seen on Plant of the Week. And then a lot of other plant material out here in the sunny side with a little bit of privacy right here at the intersection with some Blue Point juniper. All of these beds here will be drip irrigated. All of this, no sprays. And then the lawn will be sprayed. Nothing here really gets very tall in any way, shape, or form. Even the Japanese maples that I'm recommending up near the house, nothing that gets over 20 feet. The junipers are pretty much maxed out. They're probably, this one here is probably 15 to 20. These guys are probably maybe 12 to 15. And then Himalayan white birch right at the gate here, which there'll be some other ones in the backyard to kind of tie front to back. And then nice big 3.5, but hopefully 4-foot cement walkway, tying the front runway 2-9er walkways to the other sides of the dwelling. I think this is going to be very functional for them. It's just a matter of it's a large undertaking for a DIYer, and it'd be very hard to do in phases for this whole thing. You could come in and do some of the irrigation. You could do the demolition that's here, the stump grinding and other stuff that has to be done. But then you have to kind of keep going. You can't stop, otherwise weed and other stuff starts to infiltrate it again, and pretty soon you're back to where you were. So demolition, let it rest for a week or so, come back in, start again. And it's if you keep a constant forward momentum in a landscape design and bringing it to life as far as construction, that's where landscape success comes from. It's not touch it and leave. You can do that with some of the hardscape, like for instance, up here on the front deck. You know, you could get the piers, get them set. You could cut the front porch down a little bit so the decking would cover across it. You could do a lot of that stuff and let it go, but when it comes to the living, aspect of landscape construction, it's kind of a slow forward wheel that has to keep going. Otherwise, you're going back to clean up things that are going to start to emerge. Now, a couple of highlights. I used a lot of perennial through this project. Annuals up at this zone 6, kind of short-lived. Probably June through September, and that's about it. In some places, you know, down south, zones 9, 10, 11, they're much more like 8 months. Here, about 5 months max. So perennials will do a better job providing seasonal color and allowing a sense of spring coming back every year. And then they can go out like in the color bed out here underneath this juniper, and they can switch out whatever annuals or bulbs or whatever they'd like to do out there. I think that would look really neat. So the perennials are going to be the color soldiers of this landscape. They're the ones who are going to stand tall during the growing season, and then they'll go to sleep in the wintertime, much like the annuals as well. But a lot of this stuff is industrial strength. Planted correctly and irrigated correctly, this is going to be kind of an industrial strength yard. Something that they don't have to tend all the time. Beds will be mulched. Lawn will have to be tended to, obviously. But I think if we get a bluegrass and dwarf fescue mix in here, they may be able to get away with every week and a half type of mowing. But hey, for a DIY, drawn like a DIYer should draw it, I think this thing is going to be, it's going to be stellar. It will certainly be the flagship of this neighborhood. There is no doubt in my mind. It will be, according to the other yards in the area, this one will be the standout. As it should be. It's on an intersection, you know, where there's traffic here and there with a nice new fence around it and stuff. It's going to show very, very well. Really, really well. Long term, too. Now, some of the luxury items that I did put in some low voltage lighting. I don't know if they'll do that or not, but even if they did it with solar lights, which I'm not a big fan of, but if they did it with solar lights, at least it'd give some nighttime navigation through the yard, especially people or visitors or even themselves coming from the backyard through the gate. You know, this one was fun to do. I kind of had an idea what I wanted to do even when I was visiting, but now that it's down on paper, I think it's really going to look good. Lot of the elements that they wanted are sitting right here. And you notice that in designing, we always draw according to mature size of plants. Mature size, not when you first put them in, but when they're grown. So the Blue Point junipers, sunshine ligustrums, barberries, all these things are grown, so there's still space in between. We're not all crammed together like some yards get overplanted and you're having to thin out as the years go by. This should look pretty close to what it's going to look like when it's fully grown. It's going to look kind of sparse when they first put everything in, but that's okay, because as long as they tend it, they take care of it, it will mature into this and really show off nice. Okay, a little change in direction here, so flex with me just a little bit. In order to keep the length of the video down, I think it's going to make a much better idea if we break the front yard design that we did and the backyard into two parts. I mean, we have talked about this in pretty thorough fashion as far as what it's going to do for the client, what is it going to do for the value of the property. And I think you'll see kind of the difference, the functionalness. Then you'll see the backyard next week. So I appreciated you sticking with me on this. I hope you picked something up from it. You know, as always, to your landscape success, don't forget to check out the 2 previous videos that lead up to this because it makes so much more sense. And then we'll see you next week with the completed and narrated backyard. Okay? Guys, take care. If you had stuck with me this long, consider subscribing and give me a thumbs up, would you please? Channel's growing every day. Don't forget the website for the ebook and the digital course, which covers this in much greater depth. And I'll catch you next Friday. Take care.